All right, the first item on the agenda is approval of the January 19 minutes.
And again, I have some issues. And mine does not have nice numbers on it.
You want one with numbers on it?
Well, it might be easier for you guys to follow along.
Is that one too, John, with the numbers?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Sorry. There you go.
Next on the page, or isn't a page, but on line 49. This is on the second page. Julie
I found
says
that
she
too.
is becoming less and less confident. She finds it to be a hurdle. I think you mean a hurdle, H-U-R-D-L-E. Okay. And then in the next paragraph, Pam said she feels like we are trying to push this, and she thinks it should be originating up by the neighborhood. I think it should be originating in the neighborhood. Okay. And then we go down to line 65. Laura said she thinks the project has moved along, and she agrees. It does not feel like there is the support that there used, so that there, I think she means used to be, but let's just say that there was several years ago. There was. And then in the, next to the last line of that paragraph on line 70, from a letter saying yeah or nah, well, let's say yay or nay.
I think that's what it was.
I mean, yeah. We're very formal here, we don't know yeah. And what else was it? And something else. And maybe more. And then nothing until the very last paragraph. And that is on line 158, 159. John says that he thinks we need to be careful about when we engage, period. Who is asking us because he thinks the commission has the potential of, well, anyway, that whole sentence, those two sentences don't really, they have lots of problems. So how can we say this? Be careful about picking our fights, maybe, or that's pretty slangy too. We need to be careful. We need to be careful, period. The commission has the potential of hurting someone's property value, and that could be the beginning of a sentence. The commission has the potential of hurting someone's property value.
Okay, but is it broadcasting and streaming?
How should we say this?
And you press record on the screen? Okay.
How did we say this?
The whole point is that it's triggered by the building permit
Yes.
and not by hearsay.
Yes. So if we say, John says we need to be careful, the commission does have the potential of hurting property values, period. It is one thing to get a permit for a demolition because that is cut and dried and we are doing our job, period. How's that?
Good.
You get that?
Yeah, or careful about being involved, maybe, in the first sentence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Careful about when we get involved.
That, yeah. Okay,
And then that's all for me.
I had one on,
Hi,
is it open meeting?
Yeah.
the Heritage Commission?
Yeah.
Oh, come in, come in. Wow. An actual public person.
Have a seat.
On line 26 and 7, Julie then stated that the Historic Commission is considering the property again, and she volunteered someone because of the discussion of the dating of the building. I think that she volunteered to get someone, I'm not sure what, there. It was, at least I was confused.
Well, they had a lot of discussion on dating the building. And
Yeah.
so that was That was where that happened.
Oh, okay, well, then you can leave that as it is.
Mhm.
Otherwise, yours are good.
Well, it's, get a consultant instead of someone.
Mhm. Just get a consultant, period.
Yeah.
No other corrections. I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of January 19th with the corrections.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good.
Why don't we jump to Julie's thing then?
Yeah, let's go down to the certified local government discussion.
Okay, it's that time again,
Mhm.
and we need to put in a letter of intent of if we want to get a grant from the Division of Historical Resources through the certified local government process. So one of the questions is, do we want to do a surveying more of the town, which is our goal from doing that mapping project? Or, my other thought was redoing the waterfront commercial district survey from the 80s, because so much has changed. And, we've lost a couple buildings that are actually in our zoning ordinance. All of the owners have changed. If you look at the Library of Congress, I can send you the link for what the survey is, because it's on the National Register. You can see how different everything looks, which is kind of nice, but maybe we need to update it. Just, Franklin Street has been changed, and they're both called out in our zoning ordinance. The Squamscott block is new. A lot of things have changed since that inventory was done. Plus I don't know if it was the National Park Service or if it was DHR actually added on to the National Register extent of the district. So we might want to consider making that formal in the town, that it's not just, doesn't just end at Main Street, it actually crosses over the river to part of Swayze Parkway.
Say that again? I lost you.
Well, our historic district on the waterfront commercial ends at Main Street, right?
Okay, yeah.
And National Park Services, or Secretary of Interior, when we put in the application for the National Survey, or National Register, actually added on to the, what the historic district should cover. What they wanted to cover is the National Register.
Okay.
And it crosses the water from J.D. Hill to Swayze Park.
No.
So we should probably update our zoning ordinance to match that, and update the National Register publication with including that all in one piece, instead of having our piece and then in addition.
The historic district goes to Main Street, right?
Yeah.
Then what about it goes up Front Street? How
That's
far?
a separate one.
That
another-
just goes up Front Street.
Okay,
That's the
'Cause
Front
I
Street
thought there
Historic
was-
District, and they butt up here.
they're different.
If we are
Okay.
expanding it that way, do you think we could expand it up like maybe another block to cover the really old parts, like the Gas House Cemetery?
On Green Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can try that. That would involve zoning ordinance change. That wouldn't happen until next year, but doing the survey, we can give that extent
Yeah.
to the survey.
Yeah, we didn't have the waterfront wasn't developed at all before when that was originally done.
And that was done in 80, 81.
Yeah.
I remember in the 70s we tried to do something down there, and then a couple of us tried to do that this 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Brizzleton, Tony Caldero and I looked at it, but to try and, because there was a movement in I thought it was maybe in the 80s to try and redo the backside of all the buildings.
Mhm.
And we got held up at that time by Batchelder, who had a shop there.
Yeah.
And then all of them actually going out to the river. But is your idea just to update, or is it to really,
It's to update, but Pam's idea of, for at least the National Register survey, to add on, to go down Water Street a little further and include Green Street, which has one of the older houses, and it's got
Yeah.
some history about our African-American heritage. That would be good to
the old
get.
cemetery down there too?
Yep, cemetery and the gas works, yep. So that's a good idea.
Thank you.
And then the other choice is picking the next part of town. Choosing the next part of town that we might want to extend from our mapping survey.
How definite do we have to be in proposing
Usually it's a letter of intent that I have to put in by the 20th.
I see.
Doesn't have to be in a lot of detail.
Okay.
Just say we want to update our very old National Register survey.
Well, I really think updating the survey is, for Water Street, is more important than,
And stretching out to a new area.
yep.
Fine with me.
Well, you could do both of it, really.
Well, how much money do we have and how much time and
Well,
energy do we?
survey work is free.
Yeah.
We figure out a number. Dave can help me with that. It includes meeting time, charging for meeting rooms, our time as volunteers. And so we put a number out saying this project will cost $20,000. And we don't have to match those funds. We just say this is going to be the cost. Then as we go through it, we submit where we are periodically, and we get the check for $20,000 and we give it to the consultant.
Okay.
So it doesn't cost.
Do you have to put a number in the letter of intent?
I do. No, in the letter of intent.
Well, you
I'll
can't
look at
just
my
say,
own
give
list."
us money. You have to say, we think this would cost about such and such.
There should be a party to celebrate at the end.
That's true, we've never done that.
I-
We're talking about the CLG grants and. Because the Front Street hasn't changed,
No,
but the Water Street one has changed a lot. So Pam thinks updating Water Street and extending it a little bit to include, and this is just for the survey, if we want to change the zoning ordinance next year to include the changes to the district, then we have to have that discussion and go to the planning board and all
I'll
that.
be sneaking in on Cass Street.
Yeah. Well, Fred Morgan tried to get Cass Street
I
to
know.
be a separate
He
district,
did.
and
Oh,
it went down in flames. Our website does not have our survey, our mapping project on here. It says it does.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And there's a written document. But I wanted to look at what the next,
Well, if you want to make a motion, I'll second it.
okay, how shall I word this? I move to apply for a CLG grant to update the National Register survey of the waterfront commercial district with an extension from Water Street and up Green Street.
I'll second that.
I think that's,
Thank you.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Opposed? All
Okay.
right.
So, I'm gonna tell the HDC that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Because I've talked about it with them several times, and,
Well, thanks
They've
for,
had so much going on there, they really haven't.
yeah. They have a
And
few
tomorrow
things on
night
their
is going to
agenda.
be a bear also.
Yeah, we got a few things on their
I
agenda.
want to talk about that at the end here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I apologize for being late. I had to wait for Mike to get home from work before I could walk out the door.
It's okay.
Yeah, you gotta retire, that things that make it
If
a
I were
lot
only
easier.
retired, yes.
Okay,
Oh,
Did we already do the minutes? from?
Yes.
We did the minutes, so it's up to you, Maura.
Okay, so let's see. I don't have a ton of an update. I did sort of flesh out a little bit the postcard idea that we talked about last time.
Yeah.
Very simple, basically just a postcard with a return address on one side and a checkbox on the other side saying either I support the idea as proposed or I'm against the idea as proposed. And a slot for a street name if people are so interested.
I wondered if we needed a little explanation to remind people to jog their memory.
Well, this is to be included with the letter that
Oh.
we're going to send it with.
Got it.
Right, so we've gotten the letter all put together and
Got
it's
it.
ready to go. So this would just be the postcard that people can send back.
Great. That does the job, the one you, yeah.
It's just one simple question. We just say yes or no, and then we'll be able to kind of document, if people do indicate which street they're living on, which streets are in favor or opposed, and then we'll just have a little bit more data to decide.
Right, they don't
Where we
have to
go.
sign their name, they just put
No,
a street
just a
in.
street name, and if people choose not to put a street name, that's fine too. But we'll know because we'll send it obviously to just the addresses in the district, so.
Good deal.
I did have one other item. I hope that you all saw, a couple weeks ago, I got an email from Anna Grazier who lives on Warren Street, and I forwarded that all to you.
Yep.
There were just a couple of items that she had questions about or concerns, one of which was the sort of boundaries of the district and the fact that they didn't reflect what sort of is the neighborhood as it exists per se, right, in the way that Locust and Hale and Warren Street all sort of interconnect. And then also sort of the idea that we didn't have a clear sort of definition of what we were trying to do. So I did just want to talk about that. I had a couple of thoughts to respond to. I didn't know if any of you had thoughts to share, but I did want to publicly be able to talk about that. I didn't respond to Anna directly just because I felt like it should be a public conversation. So my thought about the district boundaries, and we've talked about this before, is kind of why it laid out the way it did, was mainly a focus on the architecture, right? It was about the Park Street area being sort of an initial settling area, and then the expansion of sort of the Oak Forest neighborhood, and the Cass Green Street area also being, similar age to the Park Street area. And the fact that our original survey only included Locust because we ended up just having extra money to get that surveyed. But I think the main point about that was that, we're looking at this not necessarily in a fashion of like, this is how people interact in the neighborhood, but more of an architectural survey and a desire to preserve the architecture. So I think, there's a distinction to be made between how a neighborhood functions and the way that people interact every day and how the architecture of a neighborhood sort of shows the history of sort of development over time and the ways that the town has expanded. So I just kind of wanted to clarify that as a point on why we are focusing on the areas that we're focusing on. It's to do with the architecture, it's to do with the development over time, and trying to sort of preserve that as much as possible with the idea that we're hoping that people don't demolish homes. And I think the other thought about, this started out, or perhaps it hasn't been a very clearly defined effort. And I think initially that was the case because we were sort of casting a broad net saying, do we want to do this? How would we do this? What could it look like? What should it look like if we did anything? And that was the entire purpose of the survey process that developed last spring when we asked folks to be involved and to say, how can we ask people whether they're interested in this, what elements of this they might be interested in. And so the purpose of that, I felt, was to decide whether there was any interest, and if so, in what direction. And I think since then, it gave us a bit of a direction, and so that we could focus on the demolition aspect only. So I guess I just wanted to sort of say that as it was a process that we went through, that we tried to gain public input on, that we went through and had sort of an ad hoc committee that was, open to anyone who was interested in, and that the project did focus down based on the results of that survey that we did last spring. So I just sort of wanted to share my thoughts. I didn't know if anybody else had other thoughts about the process or kind of where we stand or how we got to where we are.
Well, I want to thank you for taking this on. I mean, this is a marvelous letter, I think. It's clear. And it's certainly the postcard with a yes or no, that should be, that can't get much simpler than that.
Is this open to?
Yeah, can you just state your name and where your address?
Sure. My name is Ben Morse. I live on Cass Street.
Oh, my.
Yeah. And I'm here because I have some questions about the proposed neighborhood
Area.
or what might happen if this thing comes to be. And I'm a little concerned. When you say architecture, do you mean the literal style of buildings that are people's homes? Or do you mean how they sculpted the neighborhood when the towns were put together, like when they drew the roads and the architecture of the town layout, or the actual architecture of the colonial houses that are there?
I think we've mostly been talking about the actual architecture of the building.
Right.
But
But that architecture came along based on the growth of the town, and when it happened, you know, in that area, there would be a large house and a large house, and then as the town grew, divide up lots and have the infill,
It's
so.
delightful to have Barbara on our street.
Yeah.
She keeps us up to date
I'm sure she
with
does.
all the history that's there.
The other thing is, it's a unique piece of the town because everything is almost non-compliant. It's its own, it's a neighborhood. I mean, when we had the Parks and Recreation came out and talked about redoing the playground there, I mean, we've had people from all over the area were interested in participating in that.
So there's some self-recognition about the neighborhood feeling of neighborhood and how extensive it is, I guess.
It's a lovely place to live. I really enjoy living on Cass Street. When the snow comes, you know, there's more than one of us out there. We often help each other out. Yeah, I feel like I know the people who live on Main Street, and it's a very small one.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say I'm a little concerned about my lack of understanding about what might actually be the power of this new committee that is made. And so far, I hear all the things that it might be get whittled down to just demolishing, and I'm not sure why we need a committee that just talks about what can be demolished and what can't. I don't think that's a significant amount. And if I don't know what the committee has the power to do, and those things might change in the future, I'm not sure why I would support that. It wouldn't have my support for a committee to impose rules on my neighborhood that I don't know what it's going to propose for neighborhood rules. And so,
Just let me close the door because it's very loud all of a sudden.
Where, what's there, and then.
Sorry.
so I'm a little concerned about it, and I have more reservations than I do positive feelings about it. I don't want someone to just have the ability to say what I can and can't do just because there's a small group of people who decided that they should control these factors of this part of town. And I think one of the ways that it is a nice town is that people have the ability to kind of do what they want and make it look nice, right? So my neighbors at the end of the street just knocked down their barn and built a beautiful, replaced it with something beautiful. There aren't that many of us who live on the street that are families that stay full-time there. There's some houses that have renters. And so I'm very concerned about the purpose of this new committee and if it's really necessary. And I'm really hesitant to support something that has the ability to change stuff, and I don't know what it's planning to change. That is not, I don't feel okay about this at all.
Okay, I live,
Yeah, can I,
Oh,
sorry
okay.
Pam, can I
Okay.
just respond? Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the perspective. So the reason that we have decided to pursue this is because as a commission, we realized over the last number of years that we actually don't have the power to stop a building from being demolished. We have advisory capacity, but in the end, people can decide to tear down a house, tear down whatever they want. And while in some cases that's the appropriate thing to do because, a house may be in such disrepair that it's not salvageable.
That barn.
Like that barn. There are other cases where I think others have been concerned that it isn't necessarily about the condition of the house, but about the ability to turn it into multi-units and throw something up that looks more like what we're seeing on Main Street with that new, kind of multi-story townhouse development. So there are certainly, like you're seeing on Cass Street, there are units that are renter occupied. They're currently approved for multifamily. There's nothing stopping anybody from purchasing that, deciding that they'd rather have it be 4 modern units of townhouse and tearing it down and building that. And so the idea has been to preserve the hope has been to be able to preserve some of those homes, especially the ones that are older, especially the ones that represent sort of a unique architectural era, so that we don't lose these crucial elements of this town's history. I think specifically we've got one big multi-unit house up at the very end of the common. It's a big white mansard roofed, it's a very old house. There's literally nothing stopping anybody from buying that and saying, oh, this is approved for 6 units. We could get a lot more money out of this if we could tear it down and build these modern units.
I don't really feel like that is a threat. I haven't seen that pattern happen.
I'm gonna be honest, it's happening down the street from me. Literally, a house was torn down just a few months ago.
In what neighborhood?
On Forest Street. Well, it's on Wadley, it's on the corner of.
Oh, the
Forest
corner
and
of Wadley. Yeah, the house that was on the corner of Wadley.
Right, so, Old Cape, now has been torn down, it's being rebuilt in a style that's, I think going to be, relatively coherent with the rest of the neighborhood, and also it's a loss to the neighborhood because it's a lot bigger. It's not.
I view that very differently. I don't think it's a loss to the neighborhood. That house was in rough shape.
I agree, it was.
And they're going to replace it with something better. I don't think that house would fit under my category of architecture that defines the neighborhood in terms of like its age, that it was like a gem that was there. And I also think there's a lot more, I know there's a lot more story going on with Wadley and with the properties back that way. And I don't know how that fits into the story. But I don't think that there is the intention to put up townhouses on that corner.
Not that I'm aware of, but I think the risk exists that houses can be torn down and replaced with something that doesn't really represent the history of that neighborhood. And
It was a different scale. One of the things that we liked about that little cape that was there was, yes, it had gone into some disrepair, but, and this is what we often see when somebody comes and says, I'm taking this down. But there were still some bones to that from its era of being built. It was also in the scale of its neighbors and its placement on the lot, which the new building as it was presented, at least to me, is going to be much larger than the surrounding area. So it's I don't want to describe it. I don't know how to describe it. It was just, we thought it was, there was enough there of the original building to, if somebody had the wish.
time and the energy and the love to put into it.
Yeah, and we've seen that happen, that, people have decided to, we want to take care of this rather than just throw it away. So that's part of what this is about, is that we want to keep the character of the neighborhood. And, it's relatively small buildings. That one big white one at the end of the parkway is really the outlier for right around the parkway anyway. Cass Street buildings themselves aren't huge and overpowering. And,
We had a Cass Street building mostly knocked down
yeah.
and then rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
They kept the front.
They do.
Yeah, I remember.
But if
it's
you
still
want to
the
see a horrible example, I live down right off Franklin Street.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen those cuckoo clocks on the edge of Franklin Street? The townhouses?
Right.
Yeah, right where Al's garage used to be.
Yes, yeah, well, that's in my backyard,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah, they're in my backyard,
Yeah.
yes. I see
Cat
them.
Street?
You're saying Franklin, that used to be,
Franklin's over there.
oh, Franklin's over there?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were thinking of the ones that went up
No.
across from
And
the
down where
gas
the
station.
bungalow club is.
The bungalow club.
Street,
Okay.
down further beyond that.
And there's nothing we could do. And I can't see the river anymore. And this can happen.
So how do we protect, so is this how we do it? Because I gotta tell you, it makes me a little uncomfortable that that I'm, would be having to support a commission that I don't understand what it's gonna do, and it doesn't have any claims other than what you can't demolish, but says that perhaps they could have other rules in the future. Like, I don't wanna, like, I feel like that's a big price for what I see as, in my own little chunk of the neighborhood, not much of a threat. I think that people see the Cass Street house, with its picket fence and the surrounding colonials, and I think that's what gives the street its charm. Like, that's why people want to go there, that's why people want to be there. It's a lovely little street right off the main road, and I don't think that in my street, in my area, I'm at risk of someone putting up a townhouse because they feel like it. And so it's hard for me to buy in and say, I'm gonna give someone else the
I
ability.
didn't think I was at risk either.
Yeah, the two things I guess I'm thinking. One is that the house at 110 High Street was declared unbuildable, it had to be demolished. Even the town building inspector said, that's terrible. Drive by and take a look at it now. It's really, somebody has taken it and done a very nice job with it. It's an 1850s house. And I'd rather have that there than either a green grass, that wouldn't be bad, or a more modern structure. Now, I wonder what would happen too. I'm sure Rob Richards isn't going to do anything with his place, but he's got a big lot next to his. And the next owner could say, let me put up a real modern thing right there. And what I envision is that this group couldn't stop that. I mean, it's not a group that's going to have this great power. But at least it would have a place where people might go together and talk about it and say, maybe we could approach this guy or woman and say, we really, if you're going to do something like that, maybe it could be in the same style as our neighborhood, rather than a glass building of some sort. I mean, I don't think anybody would do that, but it's possible. And I think the other thing with this group is that it would be more of a way of touching base with neighbors to talk about the neighborhood there, which is varied. I mean, it's not all built in 1775 or whatever Rob's house is, and I don't know which one is. But there's a lot of ones that went in right when the railroad went in. And it's kind of an interesting, and there's some nice small houses there that don't have to be torn down and put a $500,000 house in its place. And that's my thought is that it would be a group, rather than just sort of, oh, that house is going, let's get some neighbors together and see if we can go to the meeting and maybe influence things. It'd be a little bit one step up from that, I guess, which is what happens now. I don't know, that's my thought.
Well, when we first started talking about this, we talked about a really widespread, in looking at the state's guide for what you can do here, and this one group that would manage it would come from the neighborhood. Right, there's the let's think about it and get it together, then there's the kind of official group that has a decision, but it all answers to the planning board. Now,
That's right.
that being said, if you're just building a new house on a site that meets all the conditions of the zoning ordinance, the planning board's never gonna see it. And the butters are only gonna get, they don't even get noticed when we're looking at the demolition.
Not required.
Yeah, so, things just happen. And if we have this kind of group, then there's a connection between the building department and let's talk to, you have to, meet these people and start the conversation.
What are the constructs of the group and what it can do and can't do and what it might do in the future?
Well, that's what we put out in this letter.
You mentioned that and I don't recognize
Somebody
that.
did
You haven't sent it out
Yeah,
yet,
we
this has
sent it
been in
out.
process, so you haven't seen it yet. That's what we were talking about with the postcard. The plan is to send this out there's two very specific things that we narrowed down when we did this survey, was to limit demolition with some pretty big caveats, honestly. So if a building is not salvageable, if it's not structurally sound, if there are sound reasons to tear it down, it gets torn down. However, it also allows for a process where it doesn't just get torn down because somebody says it's nicer to have a 4-unit townhouse or something new here. And then there's also, can I see the copy you have real quick? For new construction, there were a couple of elements, just that it conforms to setback
You can
height and
keep that and
scale.
give it to him, because you did send it out, and I did download it, I don't know what I did.
Well, we
with it.
did, I sent it to this group. We haven't sent it
Oh,
by
okay.
mail out to
Okay.
anybody yet. So here, you can take a look, that's
What about the
going
big,
up.
what about the big space in between, it's falling down anyways and should be condemned, and I'm gonna build a townhouse? What about my garage? Like, my garage is standing and it's sound, but it was made like bits and pieces, and I'd like to, at some point in time, it's on my list, like down the road, to fix it, like, cause it's the sill's gonna, there are things that needs to do, cause it wasn't well built. It's really old and rickety and put together with like whatever the owner had at the time. It's very old. And I would be in the middle. What about the people who would like to make an improvement, such as myself, to knock down something and put it up? And it's not falling down, and I don't want to build a townhouse.
Well, we just did that in a house that was right on the corner of Cass Street, and they did take down their garage and are putting up something very nice that fits.
Yeah.
And I think
feel like they had run-ins with like time delays of like, they had to stop their schedule that they were on because they had to get everyone on board with what they were doing.
It didn't have to with us.
No.
The day we walked out there and said, do it.
Yeah.
A letter was drafted to the building inspector to take it down and let him go.
I'm interested to see what the questions said.
Yeah, I think there is certainly a process where anything being demolished does have to go through, the building department and, for us for a demolition review. Hopefully it's not too extensive, for folks. And I think the idea is that with these pretty limited sort of constructs, that the group that administers it, when someone like you comes and says, look, this is a garage that was, built, like my addition was built with scraps and things from the backyard. We had to tear down an added-on room and rebuild it, and we just, kept the same framework, we kept the same footprint and the same roof lines, and things like that are not something that anybody's gonna say, no, you can't do that. But the idea is to have an opportunity to say, if you do need to tear something down, which has to happen from time to time,
You need approval.
that it be done in a fashion where people can say, yep, that makes sense, let's agree that this is a thing that has to come down, and when you rebuild, have it be.
To me, it's more about, we don't have an official way to notify butters that there's going to be a change in your neighborhood. Because, as a Heritage Commission, we're advisory only, we don't give butter notices because that's not in the state law. And we only know about what's coming down because the building inspector has to inform us. Especially if it's not going to the planning board or something like that. So unless we do a massive amount of advertising, you're never gonna know that your neighbor's taking their house down until they start taking it down.
I think I would feel so I care about the neighborhood. I love it. It's so nice. I re-insulated, redid everything. Some of the main beams were cut out and I had to re-support and rebuild the whole house. I've enjoyed it. I ripped out, and when I insulated the walls, and I found a poster from 1879 when Thomas Nast came and did a presentation at our town hall. Thomas Nast is a famous cartoonist.
Yeah.
Yes, and he,
Yeah.
and he did the donkey and the elephant
Yep.
for the two
Oh,
parties.
right.
And he drew all those things, and you can see the price at the Exeter Lyceum. And I brought it to Barbara, and I was like, well, what is this worth? And because I found it in the wall, and I was like, this is amazing, and it's framed in my house right where I found it.
Right.
And I love all that stuff, and I love the way it looks. And I'd love to keep the feel of the neighborhood the same way. I would feel a lot better about putting my support behind this commission if I knew what it was going to do precisely and what it was going to be in
You
the future.
actually, the committee that is gonna be formed for the planning board will make up those boundaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that happened, I might feel more supportive of it.
That is the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
The group has to be formed to recommend making a heritage neighborhood.
At the moment, my interactions with it and my run-ins with it and my lack of receiving a survey and then being on the list or not on the list has led me to feel like it was somebody's particular idea about how the neighborhood should be, and this is a way to take a look at our neighborhood and put some constraints on it. That was the feeling that I got when I asked questions when we had meetings, like at the Richardsons, we had meetings and sat down and I was like, what is this about? And we didn't have those rules. So that's where I am at the moment. If it changes and I learn more and I think it's gonna support the neighborhood, I would be more supportive of it.
I think in the beginning, some people thought what the committee would do would be come along and say, you're gonna replace your windows, well, they have to be 6/8 or whatever it is.
I do not want that.
And you have to paint
We
them white.
don't want it either.
Okay,
We don't want that.
yeah.
And that, I think, gave it in the beginning, a bad rap.
Okay.
And we backed off of that. I mean, we really weren't there, but
Yeah.
tried to get rid of that impression.
Well, and that happened because what we recommended to the neighborhood, that we had done the survey of the much broader area. And we said, go to the state website and look at this thing, and that is recommending really severe constrictions on what somebody can do. Like, your windows must match what was there before. If that's what you wanted, you would be in a historic district.
Right.
Right.
And so this is different, and as we've gone through the process, we're trimming that down, that manual, that, I would use an example of that. It could go so far, if that committee chose and the planning board approved, that we could make the plan that you can put up a clothesline or a flagpole. And that's how the minutia of the
Yes,
plan, yeah.
I'm familiar with this. My parents or one of my parents was the chairman of the historic district in the neighboring town, and so for many years. So I'm concerned about those things, and I like the freedoms that we have in our neighborhood. And as people come in and out and change, like there used to be a widow down the street, and I used to, snow blow and clear a driveway for her whenever that happened, and now there's a guy who parks a sailboat in his yard, and like it's different. But I feel like it's okay because there are different things, and as people change, the neighbors 2 doors down from me replaced their old clapboards with the modern, all-weather material. It's not a wood; it's a composite or something, right? But they managed to still keep the same look because that's what the neighborhood is. But nobody told them that they had to.
That's
All
why
right.
this is a heritage. A heritage district is very different from a historic district. The heritage district is like a historic district light.
And it's driven by the people that
Yeah.
live there.
And it's much about neighborhood as it is about architecture.
And the other thing about this is that, we're talking about forming a group that's going to present the idea to the planning board.
Yeah,
And then the planning board has to buy into it. And if the planning board doesn't, then it doesn't happen.
okay.
And so if the planning board decides that, that's when the official group is formed, and it's described in the manual, who should be on it. Hopefully you can get an architect, but neighbors, people from the neighborhood are really driving it. And so then the extent of what the official group is going to be is decided by that official group.
Okay.
So that's why we're still sort of kind of vague about it, because we're not deciding what that official thing is going to be.
And the people on that board have got to be from the neighborhood. This isn't people
Okay.
from Concord coming down telling you that you will do this, that, and the other.
Right.
Well, and also all of those, whatever gets, I mean, this is the idea of what people in the neighborhood said they were most likely to support. That is not necessarily what it will end up being, but let's hope that, let's say that that's the goal of what it ends up being. If it were to be different from that, and if there were the group that got together that said, let's do additional stuff, that has to be presented to the planning board, and the planning board has to approve those. And so there is also that step where people can talk to the planning board and say, no, this has strayed far from what the original intent was. This should not be approved as is. So the planning board does have ultimate oversight over this group.
This has been visualized from the beginning to be protective of the neighborhood, not to impose changes.
Or impose restrictions.
It hasn't been that at all, and
Thank you for talking with me about this. I know I've taken up a lot of your time
No.
with your
That's
questions
all we
and
had
concerns.
today.
We
Well,
really
it's-
appreciate the opportunity to
It's
talk.
it's really tough when we have kind of these things and you say we want to put a restriction in on demolitions, but we don't want to be restrictive and we want to protect the neighborhood. There's a fine line there, right?
Yeah.
There's a fine line.
Mhm.
I'm just one who's particular about the details and when it comes down to these kinds of things, because I currently am really enjoying where I am, and I just don't want to see that take a big change.
Well,
That's
that
why
was the
historic-
initial thought we had, is that that's such a great neighborhood. We don't want to destroy one building after another. Cass Street would be the last to go, I think, because it's got such beautiful homes on it. But there are a lot of little 1850s, 1860 houses that are out in that neighborhood, beyond that Cass Street, that I think we want to protect too. And the neighborhood is important.
Well, I think one of the things that makes this neighborhood so unique is that it is more organic. There's a lot of neighborhoods in town that are newer, that have been developed, in the last 100 years. That have their own charm certainly, but where there's also, 3 or 4 styles of house, and they're all sort of repeating. And this neighborhood was grown, not built, in a way, which I think makes it really special.
So we're gonna make this one test and see what happens. I think if we officially.
we're not trying to force this on anybody.
I hear you.
If the results come back from this where it doesn't have enough support, it's going to get dropped.
Yeah.
Okay. Who shows the support? How does that happen?
So we're going to send this letter out that details the proposed restrictions, regulations, with a postcard. And the postcard will say, please check a box if you are in favor of what's on this piece of paper, or please check a box if you are opposed to what's on this piece of paper. And so with a little tally of check marks, we can then document how many in favor, how many opposed, and just,
It goes to all residents on those
it's
streets.
gonna go to all residents in the entire district that was surveyed. Or
Okay.
every mailing address. I'm hoping that gets to everybody, because of course some places are owned by non-residents, right?
Right.
So there's gonna be a little trickiness of getting letters into the hands of the property owners for a few of those properties. But yes, the idea
Well,
is
we
that
could
it
just do, instead of the person's name on the envelope, just the
Resident.
resident.
right, but then we're gonna end up with tenants
Voting.
responding, which, I mean, I think would be great, but whoever owns the
They're not
building
the
may
boss
not
of the
agree.
building, yeah.
So I'm not sure how to sort of weigh that out.
And now, whenever we have to do, speaking as a select woman, whenever we have to do tax exemptions or not exemptions, but abatements, I swear that 95% of the people asking for abatements own property in Exeter but do not live in Exeter. So that's kind of what we're facing with, how do we get the survey out to the people that are going to be most affected?
Yeah.
So. So, here we are.
We're delighted that you joined us.
Yes.
Well, I've meant to come to more of them, and I pick up information here and there, but it's nice to.
Well, keep your ear to the ground, and if there's anything else, come on in.
All right.
You're welcome.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Yeah.
Sure, no problem.
Are there any more comments to?
That was all the comments that I had received,
Yeah.
so that's all I had.
I would make a motion that we go ahead and send the letter and postcard out.
And a question, so I'll second, but with some discussion.
Sure.
We've had postcards, I know, sent out like by Public Works when we had the sewer stuff going on. Is there someone in the planning building department who can format a postcard for us and get it?
Yeah, Barb can do it.
Okay.
I relied on her for mailings for,
Only because I tried to
15
format a
years.
postcard myself and failed miserably. If somebody else could take that on,
no,
that'd be great.
Barb or Kristen's great at it, and we
Okay.
can borrow her for a few minutes to take care of that.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
Do we need
wonderful.
to
So, oh yeah,
vote?
so he made a motion.
Yeah, we have motion to second.
Can you,
To go forward with the letter and the postcard.
okay. Is there any more discussion on it? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, we'll do that.
Okay. Did-
Go
I
ahead,
was
Bill.
gonna say, I was gonna ask about the next one. Do you have any information on demolition?
No, it's been quiet,
Standard.
thankfully.
Yeah, after that rush of ones, it's been quiet.
What I didn't put on the agenda, and I should have, I'm gonna give the, the board, other board people here a chance to say a little bit about what's going on with the HGC and,
I'll tell you a little bit about it. We have the big project on Front Street at the Baptist Church. We've been working with the owner, co-owners. We've been going back and forth on, we're just working with them. We're not approving anything until we know.
The new owners, not the
Yeah.
old church.
Yeah, not the new owners. They are proposing to make it all residential. They're gonna remove all the stained glass and replace it with modern thermal, keep it warm glass. We can make some recommendations about what to do with the stained glass. I would love to see it, used somewhere, but that's not my business. So it's going to be 11 units at this point. I don't know if they're going to end up with 11 units, but that's what's proposed. Materials so far seem to be in keeping with the church. I know when you look at and I pointed this out at the last meeting, when you look at the drawings online from in the planning department, it shows these big blue chunks in the roof, and we're adding these blue things. And it's very startling, but they're not adding blue. It's just the area, they're just showing us the area that they're building. So it's looking, as we work together, getting some details out, and we're kind of sussing it all out until we get, we were very concerned about wall penetrations, and if you have 11 units and they all need vent stacks, and how many are you going to see on the roof, and how many are you going to see on the walls, and So they've done some further work on that, as far as, heating and air conditioning are gonna be outside units, and they won't be penetrating, but there's still kitchens and bathrooms that need to be detailed, so they're getting a little further into their design. And then, so we're talking about that again tomorrow night. Then there's the 8 Gilman Lane that
Which was lost. They're gonna tear it down.
Well, just wait. We won't give them permission to do the tear down until we know what's going to go in place. And their first.
Is that PEA you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their first presentation was for two duplexes and a triplex. Well, there's going to be a triplex in the back, and it was massive. And really just didn't fit into the neighborhood, and that was the feedback that they got from the HDC. And they're renovating the building, the old Foster's building right at the end of, right at the Portsmouth Ave intersection, taking off the
back.
Yeah, the back and that thing on the corner,
Yeah.
and renovating it back to where it should be, or was, before the vinyl siding came up.
Yeah.
And then they're building a new duplex next to it. So that empty lot had, historically been filled with a house before. So now they've broken down the triplex in the back to have a single and two, and a two-family. So that's what they're working on with the HDC. So those are going in work session kind of thing.
I really, with the church, that rose window was given by, I'm not sure who, but it was
Yes.
somebody donated it.
Yes, they
It's a
did.
shame to lose something like that.
I know, and they showed us an example of a church that they had done somewhere else, or somebody had done,
They've done some in Boston.
where they had the floor, the built floor of one unit go across the line of the window, so that you could see, you could use the space, and and somebody got the bottom half of the window and somebody got the top half. But what they're looking at now is, or was presented to us as one of the options they're looking at, was to have a more loft kind of space, so that the floor would be removed from the windows, so it would be all in one unit. So, your first floor would be here, the second floor would start here, and then you'd all have the window. But the other ones, they haven't.
I don't know how many of the others were given, but I know that rose one was.
Several of them were, because I know I've seen when I'm sitting there and I just look at the windows and it says gift of so-and-so.
Yeah.
But
It's not our preview, but I don't know, I think the town has sort of given up on parking, because there's no way they can get parking for their cars.
we were told that was absolutely nothing that the historic district could address.
No, we
So
can't get
that's
involved.
why we just
I
shut
know.
up.
That, and the fact that it's a residential building in a non-residential spot.
And the same is true of the IOCA.
Yeah?
There's no parking there. But again,
Well,
don't mention it.
right,
I won't.
Well, it's a zoning and planning, and well, it's mostly a zoning issue, so.
yeah. They said it was grandfathered, but I think the only thing that's grandfathered is parking on Sundays
For worship.
for worship service. And I don't know. There'll be parking in the historic district, historic society's parking lot.
Yeah.
No, we were afraid they were gonna try and grab that, but they didn't. And actually, that is on our deed, that the line is right there at the stone wall. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
well,
but no, when they showed us these pretty pictures with the church with all these little gardens and things on the outside, you're not gonna get much more than about 2 marigolds outside.
well, that and sitting out on Spring Street in a patio doesn't.
There's not gonna be any patio. You couldn't even get a chair there.
Well, not on the ground level.
Mm.
I was kind of surprised that, because there is stained glass at the ground level, that you wouldn't just leave that in there. Because they have a light, they're building light wells in the sidewalk, so that if you're in the basement level, you'll get some daylight in. But I kind of like, instead of having curtains, have some stained glass there.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But, yeah,
Well, we'll have to wait and see.
yeah. All right.
Were you successful in getting that consultant?
Oh, yeah, so, yeah, the PEA thing, it was interesting, they got, they were getting pushback from neighbors that didn't want the house to, well, didn't want the triplex for one thing, and, so they didn't want the house to be torn down, because that would interfere with the layout that their PEA was trying to do. And they wanted a masonry specialist to comment on the foundation, because there had been some back and forth about when that was built and why some of it brick and was it lifted, and PEA couldn't really answer any of those questions. So it went back and forth, and finally I just said, look, we'll find a consultant who will date this house, date this foundation, and there it is. Because PEA already had an opinion from somebody that we didn't know, and they didn't give us the actual document that they produced. So I found someone who we agreed I could spend money on. Hasn't sent me a bill. I think he did it because he loves me, but or he loves Lynn Monroe anyway. That's who I found him from. So the PEA got another firm to look at it, and I got this fellow to come in, or to write a letter about it. And both letters said the exact same thing, that it was a mishmash of pieces of buildings from, some of it might have been original, but some of it might have come from another house that was torn down. There were additions that are different than what's on the maps, but the bird's eye maps are not necessarily, accurate. There's, as far as the layout, is there a porch or is there not a porch? So that, but both letters agreed that there was not enough of the original thing there. And they agreed on the dating of the basement, didn't go back. It was like all early 1820s to 50s. That was mixed. So that's what happened.
You look at it, you say if they lopped off that was a little piece on the left, it'd be a nice little colonial looking from the
They
street.
could save it if they wanted to, but they really, really do not want to.
No,
They
well-
spent more time fighting on not fixing it than, they kind of have it fixed by now.
It doesn't, the picture windows in the back are terrible,
picture windows
which you
are-
wouldn't see, but
Yeah.
they need to be. Anyway, we're not gonna solve their problem
So it
tonight.
hasn't been approved for demolition yet,
Right.
because we got burned on Franklin Street. So we're going to approve what they're going to put in place first, and then do it all as one
But
motion.
there's still gonna be something out in front.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we approved that one building up in front because it's isolated and
The new one?
freestanding. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's freestanding, had nothing to do with the demolition.
Yeah, that'd be all right. Okay.
Is there any other business?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you.